Welcome to Conversations for the Animals. I am Lisa Tynan with Houston Petset, and I am joined again by the fabulous Laura Pennino with Pennino and Partners, founder, of course, of the wonderful PR company. And this is our third episode that we're putting together these educational resources for our animal welfare partners, but also for anybody who's in nonprofit or really who has a business. All of this we think is useful. And today we're going to be talking about big issues, right? Crisis communications. And if you have spent any time in animal welfare, you know there's always a crisis. It's pretty much a perpetual state of crisis.
Yeah.
I mean,
Unfortunately.
we're in one right now.
We wish it were different.
Right? So what we want to talk about today, first, of course, we're going to reintroduce the fabulous Laura, but we want to talk a little bit about what warrants a crisis communications plan, you know, when you can kind of let something float by versus when you need to take action, and then what are some proactive steps to have in place should a crisis arise, so that you're not scrambling and caught back on your heels trying to repair it. So before we get into all of that, reintroduce yourself. Tell a little bit about Pennino and Partners and what you do, and also about your involvement in the rescue community.
Oh, yeah. Happy to. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Of course.
As I've said a few times, you know, the whole rescue world for me started before I was born. And my mom and dad helped animals and people way before I was born. My dad was criticized for taking the trash horses off the track, the ones that were destined for the glue factory. Oh, Joe, you can't take that old nag. And he's like, you know what? I can. And so I grew up with retired police horses from the New Orleans Police Department in our paddock, you know, on our farm north of New Orleans. And I grew up where I actually helped my dad to sew up a little chicken who tore its wing, you know, so we did all sorts of really little rescue things, including he rescued an owl one time and I think a hermit crab. So it was like the whole range, anything from dogs, cats, goats, horses, pigs, chickens, so all of it. So, but I got actively involved in working in the rescued pets world in 2008. And I started working with Tina and Tama, and they helped me to adopt my first Sheltie. And she was a puppy mill mom. So, and since then, I've fostered or adopted over 50 animals. I know a lot of people do a lot more than that, but
that's an incredible number. There's no.
But yeah, that's when I started counting.
Yeah,
and that doesn't count the 7 that live in my house permanently. So it's been over 50, and sometimes it's just like getting one little kitty from the neighbor's yard and getting my handyman to adopt it. So that's about the animals. And then on the public relations side, my background is journalism. So I went to LSU. I graduated from the J School at LSU and then transitioned into PR. And from the PR side, I worked for what is now the largest PR firm in the world called Edelman PR. And then in almost 25 years ago, I started my own firm. And so we work with clients of all types, you know, nonprofits, for-profits, corporate, individuals, and, you know, as we'll discuss maybe later, we're going to be offering some workshops.
Yes,
for the rescue community.
Really excited about that. That's very much a stay tuned because we know you have offered them before, and there's been a great response. Because while it is beneficial, obviously, to just sit and listen to us gab on for a little while, the hands-on and the interactive workshops can be really, really helpful for groups. Okay, so to kick off this conversation, the first thing I actually want to touch on is you mentioned that you are a PR firm. Now, I think a lot of people use marketing and PR interchangeably, but they are not the same thing.
Correct.
So PR, because that's really what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
What is public relations? I mean, that's really addressing perception of your company, correct?
Yeah, so public relations is a subset of marketing. Marketing is designed to build awareness, and there can be many, many components, as you know, Lisa. You know, advertising, sponsorships, direct mail, websites, digital marketing, PR, blah, blah, blah. Public relations is a lot about influencing, informing, and influencing.
Okay.
And so that is a lot of what we know these animal welfare groups want to do.
Right.
Right? That's a huge mission. So that's important. And components of public relations are things like blogs, newsletters, news releases, website content obviously can play into the whole PR side of things, but a fact sheet on every organization that you work with would be great. A Q&A, all those components would be very important and helpful.
Okay. So if I'm an organization, which, I work for one, but we're gonna speak in hypotheticals today. If I'm an organization and I need to know when something rises to the level of a crisis. What is the difference between just an issue, like I said, that you can kind of just let it roll by without addressing, and something that you need to take action for?
Okay, so let's start with a couple of examples.
Okay, yes.
So there are situations, and situations can become an issue.
Okay.
And an issue can become a crisis. So what's a situation? A situation is, we've heard that there may be this hoarder down the street, and we've heard that.
Okay.
It's not substantiated, right? So it's a situation.
Okay.
At that point, right? It's a situation that we've become aware of.
Okay.
Well, when does that become an issue? Well, the point at which something like that could become an issue is maybe there is a whole neighborhood, and somehow this whole neighborhood is maybe anti-animals, or maybe they are hoarding, or maybe there's a neighborhood where animals are being poisoned.
Okay.
So
that
that
happens a lot here.
Yeah, so that could be an issue. The crisis part is where, we're finding, gosh, what is it? It's like these 5 neighborhoods all in a row. It's like we're finding all these dead animals. I would say that elevates
So
to a
it's
crisis.
scale.
It's scale, and so it's impact. Who is impacted?
Okay.
What's the time frame? Is this something that, or Harvey, like Hurricane Harvey,
Just a
that's-
crisis after crisis.
Right. That's
Right.
a great example. What about all these families that are evacuating, and they've got children and animals, and what happens to these entire families with their children and their animals? Where do the animals go? Who's helping to move everybody?
Right.
Who's helping to feed everyone? Who's helping to make sure that they are going to a dry place
Sure.
or a safe place. So that's a major crisis, right?
Sure. So if from an organizational standpoint, it seems like, and we can go back to this neighborhood example, where if something is going on and our organization wants to get involved, or somehow we are dragged into it, right? It feels, and this, I'm sure a lot of our partners have experienced this, sometimes there are 2, in my eyes, main reasons that this could become a crisis for an organization. Number 1 is the public is unclear on how you are involved,
Right.
Whether or not you are doing something. So maybe you are helping, but it's not been made public, and so people think you are not doing your duties.
Anything, yeah.
Or when someone who is involved in your organization is at the center of it and maybe misrepresenting you, or doing something improper, or saying they're with your organization when they're not. That happens a lot. Unfortunately, we all have T-shirts, and people wear their T-shirts in public. So once it becomes, your organization is now directly involved, that's when we have to start addressing these steps, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So let's just use an example, ABC Pet Rescue, just a fake name,
Yes.
right? So
Not affiliated with anybody. ABC
Not-
Fake Pet Rescue.
ABC Fake Rescue. So let's say volunteer Susie with ABC Pet Rescue decides to call city council member. And Susie, who's a well-known volunteer, does happen to have her ABC Pet Rescue. And that person is going, I just don't think these neighbors down the street should have their animals. And I don't think they are legitimate, responsible pet parents,
Right.
and I am on a crusade to change that. Well, it's an accusation, right? It's an accusation at that point, and what it's going to look like is the whole organization is making this accusation that maybe hasn't been investigated.
Right. There's not necessarily any substance to it.
There may not be any substance, and so the association would be, wow, Susie's a spokesperson for ABC Fake Pet Rescue.
Yeah.
So what would happen next? What would the leaders of this pet rescue do?
Right.
First of all, like, how do we rein Susie in?
Yeah.
Right?
Step one.
Step one, how we rein Susie in. Step two is, what is our statement?
Right.
We ABC Pet Rescue are committed to ensuring the safety and well-being of all companion animals in the greater Houston area. It is our responsibility when we hear of an accusation to investigate that. However, at this point, blah, blah, blah. And then, if, let's say, those people who are accused go to a lawyer and say, wait a minute, I'm filing a lawsuit against ABC Pet Rescue.
Right.
Well, guess what? ABC Pet Rescue needs to call their lawyer in. And so at that point, you would involve your lawyer, and it's like, okay, what's our statement?
Right.
What statement? And then you'd want to continue to monitor the situation.
Okay.
So that's like the early steps.
Okay. So, and I think, with depending on the size of people's organizations, sometimes it is, they have legal counsel on retainer if you're a big organization, but sometimes it's just reaching out to a friend who went to law school. Hopefully you don't need to have a lawyer signed on representing you unless it goes to some kind escalates to a trial or anything. So, and of course you want to reach out to, if you have legal counsel, but these groups also have boards of directors. You have, executives involved. When do they need to be pulled in? Should they be pulled in from the start? Should it be dealt with as much as you can and only bother them?
It's usually good to give your legal counsel, whether it's a volunteer lawyer, and by the way, there are many groups that do volunteer. Houston has a volunteer lawyers group.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah, Houston Volunteer Lawyers. So it is very good to just give the heads up, hey, this situation has arisen, or this newscast has aired, or the story has been written and we're implicated in it.
Okay.
And the sooner the better.
Okay. So you mentioned, in this scenario with ABC Fake Pet Rescue, for example, I'm going to get a T-shirt made of
I know that.
Now I kind
funny.
of want to wear that.
I know. I just made it up.
So in this case, this is a person who has represented themselves as the spokesperson, whether intentionally or not.
Right. It's implied.
Right. It's implied. So who should be the spokesperson? Should a group have somebody kind of on standby? Should everybody be allowed to represent them? I know I have worked for some large organizations where they say, unless your title is, media this or outreach that, you do not talk to anybody. You do not publicly represent the organization in any way other than wearing a shirt. And I'm sure there's layers in between that, but who should be the spokesperson? How many should there be?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Lisa. And my suggestion is there should always be a primary and a secondary.
Okay.
So the primary needs to be either the president or vice president or the media marketing community engagement person, right? Those are the best equipped. And let's say the organization is very large, and so a larger organization or a situation where the top leaders are out of the country, or they're or they're saying, hey, I trust you, Lisa, you're really great with this, I trust you, call me in if you need me, but I'm going to trust you. So what is important is that spokesperson has all the facts and the talking points. So that's one part. But going back to what you said about, well, what if all the volunteers, what happens if you're at an adoption event, right? So let's say there's an adoption event and you've got all these volunteers and the news station comes, hey, Jackie, how do you feel about volunteering?
Yeah.
So in that situation, and again, that's not necessarily a crisis,
Sure.
but it is about media relations policies. What my suggestion would be is before any major event where you can have volunteers or sponsors, have a little briefing.
Yeah.
Hey, these are some questions you might get asked. You know, if you do get asked a question because you're a volunteer and they want to know about your volunteer experience, you know, by all means, if you're comfortable talking about it, great. If not, just say, hey, you know, Anne over there has been volunteering longer than me. Anne's a better spokesperson for you.
Yeah. It's
So-
okay to pass it off if you don't
It's
feel
okay to
comfortable.
pass it
Right.
off. And I think back to the policies, especially in a crisis situation, whether it's hoarding or an animal abuse situation, or just saying, you know, why aren't you going to get animals off the euthanasia list more? Why don't you have buses out there ready?
Right.
You know, why aren't you doing more? So if you get these accusations, and it's like, how do you control who gets to talk? And that's where the more serious the situation, the better it is to tighten it down.
Yes, to button that up. So you mentioned policies. Obviously, if you are an organization who is out in the community a lot or who is just very active publicly, it's pretty important to just assume someday a crisis is going to arise and to have policies in place, right? So what do those policies look like? And the example I'll give, because this has happened to every organization I have ever worked for, where an animal's health or well-being is unintentionally impacted. So, you know, if you work with someone who has vet services where
Oh, yeah.
either a pet unfortunately passes away during surgery or something happens to that animal where the outcome is that they are suffering, or you know, I've worked for large organizations where there are public cruelty cases where the animal is not able to be rehabilitated and has to be euthanized.
Right.
And the backlash can be one person throwing a fit on social media. It can be protests marching down the
Right.
street.
Right.
So having something in place for even situations that you can't, in your wildest dreams, can't imagine.
Right.
Having a policy in place
Yeah.
is good practice. So what does a policy like that look like?
So I would definitely recommend having a mini plan.
Okay.
You know,
Yep.
even if it's just 10 pages
Yep.
initially, even if it's just a little PowerPoint. So number one is have a policy. What is that policy? It defines who is going to speak in a situation to the media or to volunteers or
Stakeholders.
to community
Right.
or anybody, like who is going to be the spokesperson. Then who's going to be responsible for helping to get all that information together. Maybe it's a board, maybe it's the internal marketing and PR people, but in that policy you want everyone's name,
Yep.
email, affiliation with your organization, and mobile number.
Okay.
It's really important because if something happens, it's not let me wait till that person gets back from vacation.
Right.
It's a now.
Yeah.
So it's like how to activate the
Okay.
team, right?
Okay.
Who is your core team? I'm actually working on this with one of our clients
Oh,
right now.
great.
So
It's fresh on your
it's
mind.
fresh on my mind. So it's great to have a core team established
Okay.
and that phone list so that that's right away available. The very first line is contact Susie, contact Joanne, contact Alexander, whoever. That is number one, front and center. The other thing that I see happening a lot, and this is where it's important too, on websites, more and more people are not putting phone numbers. And email addresses, people are not putting phone numbers. Why is that a problem?
They don't know who to reach if they want a statement from you.
And if they want a statement and you don't, we attempted to contact ABC Pet Rescue and no one responded.
Yep. That's
So
what gets published.
That's exactly
Right.
what gets published. And we had a situation with that with a real high-tech client where the reporter called into the main number.
Yeah.
Never called our PR firm, never called the marketing department, and the response the message that got published was, client X was not available, but the message never got to the right people.
Right. And that what that looks like often is they did not make themselves available for comment, is like it's almost like denial by omission.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you are accused of or involved with, if you quote unquote refuse to comment, people assume that you're
or
guilty.
there's a perception that you
Right.
didn't comment, and
Right.
when maybe you never even got the message.
Exactly.
So my suggestion on that, going back to your policy,
Mm-hmm.
it dovetails. So on everyone's website or on everyone's Facebook page, if you are a member of the media and you have an urgent or time sensitive need, please contact person, phone number, email.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, I don't want an email. I don't want a call. Take it.
Yeah.
You're better off taking that call.
Oh, yes.
And the way to and we're going to do another, spokesperson program or media relations program in the future. But one of the ways that you can give yourself a little bit more time in a crisis situation. So let's say the Houston Chronicle calls and says, Lisa, I need a statement.
Yep.
I want to interview you. Yes, I'm happy to help you. I'm in the middle of something right now. Can I call you? What's your deadline? Can I call you back?
Yes.
In 15 minutes? I promise I will, but I just need 15 minutes. And what that gives you a chance to do is go gather your
And
thoughts.
put your talking points together. And that's another, so I just led myself, that was a transition. Talking points. So having part of your policy should be maybe having just standard talking points for potential scenarios that could arise, right? And one of the benefits of having literal printed out or digital talking points is that it doesn't matter who is speaking or who's available to speak.
It's the party line.
Exactly. You can send a link and say, this is our company stance. This is what you need to say. And that way, someone who is speaking on your behalf, whether it's your president or it's a volunteer who has been given the okay, they have explicit talking points that they can address.
Direction.
And if it goes outside of that, you can say, I'm unable to comment on that.
Or I don't have that information, or it's premature. So a real life scenario that I can share, this many years ago, I think it was 2003, I had been in a meeting with one of my clients who owned a law firm. And he said, I said, if you guys ever need help, issues in crisis community, our clients are small, privately held. They're not public facing.
Right.
A lot of them are business to business, behind the scenes. Literally 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. I had just gotten out of a yoga class, and I was in my yoga outfit, my sweatshirt, and all ratty. And my client calls and he says, how fast can you get to Rocheron, Texas? And I went, I said, I don't even know where Rocheron, Texas. I didn't know where it was
That's
at the
where
time.
our producer is
Yeah,
from.
I didn't even know where it was at the time. And I was like, let me see. So it was 45 minutes away from where I was, and he said, well, have you seen it? It's like there was this plant explosion. It's an underwater wastewater disposal facility in Rocheron, Texas. And I mean, this is all in the public record. And so I forgot the name of the actual place, but it was a privately owned ranch, and the Texas Railroad Commission allows underground disposal of brine from the oil field. It's oil field waste, and it's allowed. Well, typically it's innocuous. However, what came in to the facility on the manifest was different than what was actually in the tank to be unloaded. So when the workers started to unload this, what was supposed to be brine, that's not what it was, and it was combustive. And so it blew up.
Oh, no.
It instantly killed 2 people, badly burned 5.
Oh, God.
And then one of the 5 that was badly burned did die. And so some of them went by life flight. Some of the others, the owner's sister just put them in her car and flew as fast as she could to the hospital. And so my lawyer client is going, Laura, you think we should get, let's say Joe, that's not his name, the owner, but do you think we should get Joe on TV? And I said, absolutely not. I said, he just saw, first of all, he doesn't do this all the time. Secondly, he just saw his people killed in front of his eyes.
Right.
I said, the man has to be in shock because I know I would be. I said, absolutely not. I said, I'm happy. And they were not my client except right then.
Yeah.
So I said, there's 3 things we're going to say, and this is it. Our thoughts are with the victims and their families. It is premature to determine the cause of the accident, and we are cooperating fully with investigators. That is it. And a certain ABC 13 reporter kept sticking the microphone in my face and kept asking me, and I kept saying, I said,
That's all I got.
that's all I got. That's all I got.
Yeah.
And it was very intense for about 72 hours. Like, I slept with a clipboard and my phone and a pen and paper in my bed.
PR is not for the faint of
No.
heart. Good gracious.
No, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I knew it, and I set my alarm for 4 o'clock because I knew that the morning news reporters were going to get into the station and need the morning condition report.
Right.
So I was ready for them. I'm like, okay. You know, so we'd have to call the hospitals and check on the condition of the people.
So that is intense.
It was very intense.
And you know what though? It's not the same because humans and animals have different place in our society. But in animal welfare, we do deal a lot in life and death, and there are crises that surround it. And so it's, you know, if you can put yourself in a place where, like, imagine that you are in that kind of emergency situation, do you feel prepared if somebody sticks a microphone in your face?
Yeah, and the thing that I can think of, you know, especially right now, we've got the heat, right? And so what happens if, you know, there's a suburban full of dogs and cats, and you see this big suburban full of dogs and cats, and there's no AC running, there's no human in there. Well, that is
That's emergency.
It's an emergency,
Yeah.
right? And so what if a passerby calls and says, well, I know that, you know, bark should come out. Well, then what if bark is on the scene? That is a crisis situation, right? But who from bark would be the right person?
Right.
And it might be an animal cruelty officer who would come in and talk about that too. But that's
Right.
just an example, right?
Right.
It would be like, depending on what the situation is, who might rotate in and out of that spokesperson
And
role.
people would want to hear from someone who seems like they might be an expert in whatever they're talking about.
Yeah, and somebody might like, because I just looked this up recently about what can you do. And in Texas, we can break a window if we have to break a window.
You won't be charged for
Yeah.
any kind of civil crime if you do that. Now, they do recommend depending on how urgent the situation is,
Yeah.
either calling the animal
911,
cruelty.
yeah.
But if you know, you can call the SPCA or you can call the Harris County Task Force. If the animal's in distress, you
Yeah,
can.
if you see it panning
Yep.
or whatever. Yeah.
You can call 911, and if it looks like it's
Dire.
actively dire, you can break the window. Now, you won't be charged. They're not saying, yeah, everyone break car windows.
Yeah.
But you won't be charged.
Right.
I actually had to look that up too recently because someone asked me about that. So we're talking about all of these crises that could arise. Obviously, not all of them are going to be that kind of emergent situation where somebody calls you and tells you they're happening. Sometimes you don't even know
Right.
that someone is talking about someone has accused your organization of something. What is the best way to keep track of that, to make sure that your name is always held in the highest regard in your community?
There are a few ways. So one, obviously, is to set up Google alerts.
I have so many Google alerts set up that I get on my phone.
Yeah, so that's one way. And another is for someone to actively monitor your social media
Okay.
channels and see. And then that's another, we talked about that before,
Mm-hmm.
like what if there's a negative comment, you know, and it's unfounded.
Right.
You know, sometimes you just want to maybe take down that comment, you know, send that person a note and say, hey, I'll respond to you privately.
Yes.
And then take down the comment. I know that sounds drastic, but sometimes that's what you have to do. The other thing that's important is to do, you know, let's say it's a larger group, survey the volunteers. What's the feedback from the volunteers? What is your perception of our organization? Survey the board members. Survey the the sponsors. Survey the community partners. If you have community partners, what are their perceptions?
Because that's a wide net.
It's
you're
a
able to
wider
cast
net,
there.
and you can then determine, if they're saying that our group doesn't do enough of, or, you know, is accusing us of maybe getting involved in too much, right? It can be either way.
Right.
It can be not doing enough or doing too much of, and we all know that it's never enough,
Right.
In this
In animal
world,
welfare,
you know,
yep.
it's never enough.
Yep.
So those would be a few ways.
Okay. Yeah, and Google Alerts are free. It's not like you have to pay for any kind of service. So you can put in your organization's name. You can put in the names of your public-facing people. If you have, Houston Pet Vet, we have Tina and Tama. Everybody knows them. I have Google Alerts set up for them, so I always know if anyone is going to say anything about my co-presidents. I want to know.
You can
We
see.
never have anybody say anything bad about them, obviously, but I know, and I constantly have this feed coming in. It's really easy to set up.
One quick other thing, and this is there are services, monitoring services.
Okay.
So I think we've done some reports for you guys.
Yes.
And for us, it costs us as a firm. How much does it cost us? $6,000 a year.
Woo.
Yeah, and that's cheap.
That's on the low end.
Yeah, but if any of the groups listening need some of that, I mean, we could give people like a bargain basement deal on doing some monitoring. And what's great is you can set a parameter. You can say, I want to see what has been written about us from January 1st to July 13th.
Right.
And then it won't be completely comprehensive, but what's great about it is you'll get the full report and you can read through and go, this was good, and this was negative.
Yeah.
And then you can go, wow, I can go back and look at who wrote that article or who aired a story and may have the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
really
even
valuable.
if you see someone who has written something or aired something that is not correct, even how you handle that is important. Like, hey, Johnny, I saw that this article was published. It's not exactly factual. We'd like to send you a document that outlines the facts. And in the future, if you need our help, we're available. We're here to
Absolutely.
help you. So, but sometimes there are those runarounds and there's no interview, but just somebody's written something.
Right. So, and you bring up a really valuable point. I think we have, in Houston, we are lucky to have quite a few newscasters, journalists who are very supportive of animal welfare and do incredible stories talking about what's happening and what all of our partners are doing and working on. Those relationships are valuable to have, not just for helping get the word out, but for reaching out and clarifying something or correcting the record. But even if you don't have those relationships, I don't. People may or may not know this, but at the bottom of almost every online article, it says, to issue any corrections, send an email to this. If you don't have a
Something's not right.
contact,
Yeah.
you can absolutely, you don't have to sit there and just take it and say, well, they got our entire mission wrong and all of our numbers are wrong. Oh, well, you can absolutely, and if they are a good outlet, they will issue a retraction. And they'll
or
fix
a clarification.
Or a clarification.
Yeah.
So it's worth monitoring to make sure that the public record is correct about your organization and the work that you're doing.
And one other thing, so let's say any organization, maybe there's been something like an overarching negative view of that organization, and we all know that happens. There are ways that as an organization you can request an editorial board visit. Let's say if it's the Houston Chronicle, you can say, hey, I'd like to meet with the editors and just lay out our mission, tell you here's what we do. Oh, by the way, could we contribute an article?
Yeah.
And that isn't always the case, but it's possible.
Absolutely. And you can always submit an editorial to any paper. And
Yeah, or a letter to the editor.
Yeah.
The other thing that a lot of your groups definitely should know about is public service announcements are free.
Okay.
Those are free. And so let's say there is a lot of, buzz about heat and animals. Well, and not necessarily saying that your group has done anything wrong with that, but just keep doing the positive work,
Right.
so that when something negative happens, you have a nice stockpile of goodwill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So once to bring it all to a close, once the crisis has passed, because while in the moment it can feel like this is the end, we're never getting through this, usually, barring any extreme circumstances, the crisis does pass. What's the next step? You've done your interviews, you've been on TV or radio, and you've clarified, or you have issued a social media statement that you have posted. What happens, a day or two after you've cleared that, what you call the danger zone?
Yeah, that's where continuing to monitor the situation,
Okay.
what's been written, is good. The other thing is to identify, where else maybe we be vulnerable.
Okay.
And so going back to your policy, what's great is if you can outline different scenarios. So one scenario might be a natural disaster. One might be a fire. That's, we see that happening, barn fires,
Yep.
right? Or we're seeing that a clinic is on fire.
Yep. Or a shelter gets hit by a tornado, which just happened.
It happened in Pasadena,
Right.
right? Really bad.
Yeah.
None of their doing.
Nope.
Act of nature. But if you can outline these scenarios, so what if, God forbid, animals turn on a rescuer and badly hurt that rescuer
I've
or
seen
kill
it.
the rescuer, right? I mean, so to have these different scenarios laid out, injury or death of a major officer of
Someone
an
in your
organization,
Okay.
and it could even be a train, like a train wreck. That happened with one of our clients. The president of one of our client companies got killed by a train.
Oh my God.
He was. We don't know what he was doing in his car on the tracks, but he did.
Wow.
We don't know. Like, we never got the whole story, but it was like the company president got hit. His car
And
got
you
hit
have
by
to
a
make
train.
a statement about that. Yep.
Yep. So that kind of stuff, just to outline those scenarios, and then have that in your policy book, in your procedures book, and then you would have sample little statements. It can even be fill in the blank.
Yep. And what's not nice, but what is, helpful about going through an experience like that is that now you know exactly what worked and what didn't work, and you can put that on paper, not just in, your corporate knowledge in your brain. You put it on paper. That way, if and when you ever leave the organization, anyone who comes
You have a
after
record.
you, they have learned from your trials and
Exactly.
tribulations. I mean,
And Lisa, you brought up a good point. One of the things that can be done after, so you're past the heat, it would be great to do a debrief.
Yep. We call them the post-mortem.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds terrible, but really,
true.
you got to sit down and say, what happened?
Yeah, what happened? How did we address that? What are we more aware of? What else? Where else are we vulnerable? Who are our supporters and who are our detractors? And if you do that while it's all fresh in your head, that's a good thing.
And write it down. I can't stress that enough because, we're, especially in the animal welfare and in the nonprofit world, there is staff turnover. That's just a reality of how we work. And if you have all of this incredibly beneficial knowledge because you experienced everything and you take it with you and you didn't leave it for the people who come after you, you've done them a great disservice. So it feels weird to actually write stuff down and print it out in our digital age, but having an actual physical binder can be so valuable.
It is good.
It's tangible and you can look at it and put your hands on it and feel like you're absorbing that knowledge.
Exactly.
We went long because this is such an incredibly important topic for everybody who we work with. I mean, I can't think of a group who has skated through scot-free without anybody getting mad at them in this industry. So this is really, really valuable. And as Laura said, we are planning to sometime in the fall after our soiree, we're going to put together a workshop. We'll determine whether it's virtual or in person, but it will be open to our partners to come in. It'll be free because Laura and Pennino and Partners has been so gracious to donate
We'll be happy
these
to do it,
services,
yeah.
where you can come and you can learn crisis communications. We're going to talk in our next
Right.
episode about media and
Some sample media training.
exactly. And all of this is incredibly valuable because, like you said, we want to be prepared for a crisis, but you also always want to be out in front and showing the good that you're doing.
The good work.
Because we are doing so much good. I say we, but we collectively
Yeah.
in animal welfare.
The thousands and thousands of
Yes, absolutely. So again, thank you for your
people. Glad to be
depth
here.
of knowledge here.
Thank
This
you
is-
for all you guys do. I mean,
Oh.
it's just a lot.
it's a labor of love, but we know we can't do anything else. This is what we do. So we are going to be back with Laura for one more episode, and we'll also be coming to you with more information about the in-person training. So thank you again for tuning in to Conversations for the Animals. We will see you next time.